I love Pokemon. I really do. It's easily in my top 5 franchises of all time, and many of the games are still personal favorites. There's no denying, though, that the franchise isn't perfect. There are many small issues that people have with the games, and I definitely have a few problems of my own with them. When I was originally making this video, I had planned it to be a sort of in-depth look at all of the issues I have with the Pokemon game series. As I finished the first draft of the script though, I noticed I was a little bit too negative, and it ultimately ended up as a rant video. I enjoy having discussions about ways to improve and add to the franchise, and I feel that giant rant videos don't really encourage healthy discussion. Maybe in the future I'll put up a longer discussion video about my issues with the franchise. I eventually came to the conclusion to make a list of 5 big things that I want in a Pokemon game that I believe will make them better. Now keep in mind, this list is really only things that I want to see in Pokemon games. I'm sure that everyone out there has many different ideas and thoughts on what GameFreak could do to make them better for them personally. Now what sets this apart from any other list about new Pokemon game features is that most of these ideas are a lot larger in scale and deal with almost fundamentally changing how a Pokemon game is designed and played. You're not going to find trainer customization or Pokemon walking behind you on this list. Those are pretty great features, but aren't necessarily big or game-changing to me. Enough introductions though, right? Let's take a look at one of the things that GameFreak could definitely expand on and improve. A quick side note before we begin. The ideas in this list aren't necessarily ranked, but I suppose if you had to rank them, then this would be number 5. A better story. Pokemon has never been known to have a deep story. The mantra for the games is always gameplay first, then story. Sometimes it even feels like they just make a new feature, then quickly construct a rushed and unpolished story around it. The Generation 5 games actually had a decent story. It involved the idea of truths versus ideals, and centered around the king of Team Plasma, N. Throw in a plot about N's foster father taking over Unova, along with plenty of side story and characters, and you get a rather charming tale that the player can actually get invested in. We need more Pokemon games that actually go to this length to tell a comprehensible and appealing story. While yes, Pokemon is aimed mainly at kids, that doesn't mean it can't have a more complex story. Plenty of media out there is targeted to children, but tells a decent and overall compelling story. I see no reason why Pokemon can't have a good story like other games or TV shows. Kind of a side note to all of this, but they really should stop getting the cover legendaries involved in the main plot of the games. Sure, it's pretty cool to have such a mighty and powerful force take part in the story of the games, but it ultimately makes the game stories feel even more similar. In every game since Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, we've always had an evil team try and take control of the region's legendary and use it to conquer the world, drown the world, freeze the world, kill the world, etc. It's become rather repetitive at this point, and I feel that making the cover legendary into an optional quest during the game would leave more room for unique and creative storytelling. Whatever happens with the next game, I hope that they at least try to make a story with a compelling villain and a great cast of characters, and not have an evil team leader try to kill everybody. Again. The next idea I have for future Pokemon games is a feature that's actually made its debut in Pokemon Black 2 and White 2, but was promptly removed from the series afterwards. A harder difficulty in the games. It's no secret that the Generation 6 games are easy. With low levels and the addition of an enhanced experience share, this truly is the easiest generation to play and beat. Junichi Masuda has stated that they are trying to appeal to the modern generation of gamers, and thus have made it easier to keep their attention spans and give a constant sense of accomplishment. Now that's all fine and good, but some people out there want a harder difficulty similar to the Generation 1 and Generation 2 games. I realize that not everyone would want a harder difficulty in the games, but I think that Pokemon Black 2 and White 2 had the perfect solution. In those games, there was actually a challenge mode that made everything harder, along with an easy mode, which made the game, naturally, overall easier. The way they implemented it in those games was pretty bad, but GameFreak should really consider bringing it back for the modern games of Pokemon. Perhaps even expanding on it too. Maybe an updated challenge mode would implement better strategies for trainers and improve their teams. At the very least, a harder difficulty setting would be optional, and those who didn't want it harder wouldn't need to use it. The next idea I have for Pokemon games sort of ties back into the better story idea I had earlier. Branching story paths. It's long been tradition in the Pokemon games that you're always a trainer, you always beat the evil team, you always get 8 badges, and you always challenge the Pokemon League. Those are like the 4 commandments of Pokemon. What if they actually changed it up in a game? What if you were able to be part of the evil team of the region and take part in their story? Rather than have just one story and quest you were able to do, what if in the beginning of the game you could choose which story you would want to do first? Be a Pokemon trainer, or be a member of the evil team? Whichever one you choose would influence most of the gameplay elements in the game, like changing which starters you would get, the Pokemon available to you, and even what you would face as a gym leader of sorts. Why think so small though? It honestly doesn't even need to be limited to just a Pokemon trainer and evil team member. We should be able to choose out of a variety of different trainer archetypes to customize what kind of adventure we have. It would be incredibly fresh to have maybe a contest idol, whose main goal in the game is to conquer all of the contests, or to have maybe a Pokemon Ranger as a playable character, whose goal is to go around the region protecting wild Pokemon. Even having a Pokemon Professor or Researcher class would make the game much more interesting, where the goal would be to complete your Pokédex. The possibilities are endless. Do I think this idea could happen? No. No, I don't. It would make the games way too diverse, and it would be a lot harder to make each class feel fully developed in their goals. But after 15 years of doing the same basic quest and games, I think it's time that GameFreak finally lets us have a choice in what kind of trainer we are and what kind of adventure we have. I really think that GameFreak should embrace letting us choose more in our Pokemon adventure. This ties into the next idea I have for the games. Nonlinear gameplay. Alright, let me explain this one a little more, as it does sound a little bit weird. In the Pokemon games, the gameplay is always very, very linear. This means that you do all of the events that GameFreak has planned in the order that they have planned, and there's no way to do things out of that order. You're following a line. For example, there's no way that you could go to the 8th gym of Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald right after you started the game. The same idea has been in all of the Pokemon games. We all remember the infamous blackout in Lumiose City that prevented the player from getting to the northern part of Kalos, or the random people just standing around in Unova blocking the door. This was GameFreak's way of ensuring the players followed the path that they had laid out. In the Pokemon games, there's a very good reason for this, and that is to essentially track the player's progress through the game. If you could wander all around a region, then you would run into level 50 Pokemon, while your Pokemon could only be level 10. This would break the game and make it almost impossible to progress. There are ways to get around this issue though, and I do have a way to combat this problem. It does involve some slight linearity, but it overall would give the player more freedom to choose their own path in the games. I'm going to use Kalos as an example for my idea of what I want in a non-linear Pokemon game. Keep in mind though, that for this idea to reach its maximum potential, a region would ideally need to be created from the ground up with this idea in mind. In order for this idea to work, the player would have to start in a much more central part of the map. Lumiose City is a perfect candidate for this. The player could then choose any of the 5 directions to go right at the start of the game. They could go north to the Fairy Gym, southeast to the Rock Gym, or any of the other directions. It's the player's choice on where they go first and which gym leader they battle first. The problem that would arise in the standard GameFreak Pokemon game would be that the Pokemon on this route and this route would be completely different in levels. In order to keep the levels scaling correctly, you would have to lock all other routes after you choose one to pursue, changing the Pokemon levels on your chosen route. For example, once you choose this way to go, to fight the Fairy Gym leader first, all of the Pokemon on this route would be level 1 to 10, or something similar to that. Once you choose to go this way, all other routes back at Lumiose City would lock until you have beaten all of the gym leaders on your chosen route. After you've beaten the gym leaders on your route and returned to Lumiose, you can then choose a new route to go on, such as this one. All of the Pokemon on that route would then scale to your level range and be locked at that level for the rest of the game. This would include trainers and gym leaders along with their Pokemon. To sort of summarize what I'm saying, say for example you started over. You could then choose this route and have the Pokemon there be at level 1 to 10. Then, after you beat the gym leader, you could go to this route and have the Pokemon there be level 10 to 20 to scale to your Pokemon's levels. You could choose any combination of these routes in any order to have your own customized adventure. Hopefully that made at least a little bit of sense. Nonlinear gameplay can be kind of a crazy concept to explain, and it doesn't really work the best on this region because it was specifically made with the signature linearity in mind. I mean, a lot of these routes have a bunch of towns and gyms on their string. If GameFreak was to truly do this and give us the freedom, then they would have to design a whole new region with this feature in mind. It's one of the big things I feel that Pokemon should include to truly give the player a better sense of freedom and control over their game. The last idea I have isn't really so much a big feature, but I feel that it's time that this happens. The removal of HMs. This isn't so much as including a feature as it is removing an outdated feature. It's not one of the most game-changing ideas GameFreak could go with, but I think the time has come for hidden machines to disappear from the games. HMs have been in the game so that player could progress once they got them. Think of them almost like keys in this scenario, while the doors are the obstacles they help you get past. Once you got cut, you were able to get past that bush and make it to the next city. Or once you got surf, you were able to swim to the next town and gym leader. This is all fine and good, but the problem is that there is no way to delete them from your Pokemon unless you go to a move tutor. This was done to ensure that the player couldn't get stuck in a certain area due to a level design oversight. For example, surfing to Cinnabar Island, then releasing your Pokemon that knows Surf, and you were unable to catch another water type to get off of the island. It makes sense when you think of it that way, but the issue I have is that they are generally unwanted moves that take up space on your Pokemon's moveset. I shouldn't have to teach my Swampert, or any of my other Pokemon, Rock Smash, just to progress past one small rock in the game. Sure, you could catch a small Pokemon that is capable of learning an HM, but that sort of defeats the point of being able to use a team of your own Pokemon throughout the game. Instead of HMs, they should give us key items that function the same. Give us a surfboard to surf around on, giant scissors to cut trees down, heck, even legit scuba gear to use dive with. They could distribute the HM items just like actual hidden machines, while the previous HM moves could just become regular TMs. Surf is such a good move and I'd hate to lose it. I think this is a great way to get the franchise up to speed and cut loose the baggage that has been holding down the gameplay for so many years. And those are the 5 things I want GameFreak to add to the Pokemon franchise. Granted, these are just a few examples out of a much bigger list I have to make not necessarily my dream Pokemon game, but a better, more fresh Pokemon experience all around. It's almost depressing to think that outside of the graphical improvements, the core Pokemon formula hasn't really evolved since the original games. I realize that some people like Pokemon the way it is now, and I completely get how you feel. I still love the games and I don't think they'll ever drop in quality. But I think most people out there will agree that they're starting to get a little bit stale and repetitive in nature. If you have any thoughts, comments, or opinions, feel free to share them in the comments below. It's always interesting to hear what other people want to see in Pokemon games. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you later.